Welcome, everyone. We're so excited tonight to be live with Josh Rugiano. So he's quite an interesting individual, very multifaceted. Josh, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. Josh,
Thank you.
absolutely. He is an ultra marathon runner, an actor, and he's passionate about mental health awareness. So before we dive into whatever we're going to discuss tonight, Josh, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and just the basics about why you're aligned with our mission to protect children?
Sure, absolutely. So, born and raised in Australia originally. I've been in the States now for 9 years in total, 4 years in New York, 5 years here in LA. I first heard about Vets for Child Rescue from the foundation that I was working with originally with my first ultramarathon, which was America's Soldier Network. A woman named Annie Nelson who started that foundation. I reached out to because I wanted to find another charity in regards to child rescue. Once I started to hear more about the film Sounds of Freedom, I think it's called, and how I wasn't aware of how much that was happening in this country. Despite me being, from Australia and everything, I consider America my home now.
Yeah.
So I reached out to her. So I reached out to her and she put me in touch with Craig, and then I had a conversation with Craig, and it kind of spawned from there. That's kind of how I found out about you guys. Oh, you've gone silent on me, Kim.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was muted. Thank you.
That's okay.
I was saying, no, I love it. I want to unpack some of that a little bit more because I love hearing from people who were not aware and then became aware, just like what that journey is like. Because, of course, we're embedded in this mission where we live it, breathe it every single day.
Sure.
There's still some of us see it as like, okay, enough with awareness. Everybody's saturated with awareness. Let's take action. The way that I oversimplify it, though, is that awareness is step one. Awareness is acknowledgement. And then step two is taking action. But you have to first acknowledge what you're doing in order to do something correctly, specifically something solution oriented. So I love that come up story. And before we get into what we're about to talk about as well, you run about how many miles a week these days?
Right now I'm running about 100 miles per week. Yeah, so 6 days a week. A lot of those days I'm running twice a day. So it'll be 10 miles in the morning, 10 miles in the afternoon, or it'll be 20 miles in the morning and 10 miles in the afternoon. It just depends on which day, yeah.
Awesome. And this is I know you want to bring awareness to this topic, and I love that there's people from all over the place who are doing what they can. And I just want to highlight this and thank you for that, because there's a lot of people that want to help but don't feel like they can do something. So do you want to talk a little bit about your ideas around raising awareness? And, before we get into the meat about what we're doing, and then we also want to talk about mental health. But
yeah, I'll start.
Take action.
I'll say this: children need to be protected, and it's our duty as people who are aware of the horrible things that can happen in today's culture and today's society. It's our duty to protect, and also to shine a light on the kind of darker issues that happen in today's world. It's our duty to bring light to those things so we can kind of unpack everything that's going on. Rather than kind of putting things to the side, it's our duty to bring it forward. This is what's happening. This is what needs to change in order to better our society and better every single person that kind of pushes these kind of things out of the forefront. I think this is one of the things that's really going wrong in terms of child trafficking in this country that I haven't seen a lot of people talking about, especially here in Los Angeles, where a lot of it's happening.
Yeah, that's let's unpack that a little bit. So tell me about before you came to, before you found Veterans for Child Rescue, tell me about your awareness about child trafficking, either from your history, your childhood, and your experience in Hollywood.
So I've been extremely fortunate and lucky in my life. I had no experiences growing up that kind of I had quite a safe childhood. I had extremely great parents who loved me deeply. I was very lucky in that regard. Um, you hear about these things through movies, and that's really where I first started hearing about this. And like a lot of people, you see it in a film and you kind of brush it off. It's like, oh, it's part of the film. That's just the way it is. But I did have an experience actually working at a bar in Venice a couple years ago. I was out front with a security guard. We were just talking, and a gentleman approached us with his daughter, and he needed to use the bathroom. So he said, "Can I come in and use the bathroom?" And I said, "Absolutely, go ahead." And he's like, "My daughter's in the pram here. She'll be fine." And me and the security guard said, "I wouldn't leave her alone here if I were you, just because Venice is not a safe place for children to be left alone." But he said, "No, if you guys watch her, I'll go in 2 seconds and then I'll come out." And I said, "Okay, fine. We'll keep an eye on her for sure." Maybe about 2 seconds after he left, the security guard and I turned our eye for 2 seconds. We looked back and there was an older gentleman who looked a little disheveled, started trying to have a conversation with the girl. And so the security guy and I looked at each other and like, okay, this is not okay. So we walked up to him and we're like, "Hey, what's going on here?" He said, "Oh, I'm just asking her for directions. This is a 2-year-old girl." He's like, "Okay, well, you can ask us for directions. Where are you looking for? What are you looking for?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just looking for this place up the road. I'll go there now." So we kind of started to pursue him a little further and say, "What are you looking for exactly? Let's hear what you're trying to see up the street." And as we kind of pressed him further, he ended up running away. So it's kind of situations like that are it doesn't make my blood boil, but it's like it's our duty, like I said before, to kind of protect and to question the motives of people that are out there trying to kind of brush things off like this. Yeah, so it's situations like that that kind of urge me on to kind of help and to promote awareness of things like safe parenting. Not leaving your child alone in a place like Venice Beach or alone in general in certain parts of Los Angeles specifically. That's just where I am. But yeah,
I think that's where that awareness comes in, because there's a lot of parents that don't want to be a helicopter parent or too much anxiety, and I understand that. And I'm not a parent, and I have a huge respect for the good parents because it's a tough job. But
yeah, of course.
Awareness is so important because the current society is very different than what people may have experienced 40 or 50 years ago growing up, both within the USA as well as globally. The other aspect of awareness is that knowledge is only power if you do something with it. So if you guys, and first of all, like, I want to stop and highlight the fact that I know it sounds pretty normal for 2 grown men to take action to protect a child, but you would be surprised how many grown adults, for whatever reason, and I'm not here to judge or anything. It's just that without awareness, people may not know what to look for. Not be aware that this person, like, oh yeah, he's totally just a stranger asking a 2-year-old for directions. Okay, bye. Sure. Right? Like, they may not see it for what it is, and or they may not take action. Now let's pretend that it really was just a stranger without nefarious intentions. Why would you not still check on that situation and intervene? Why would you, at the very least, not let that person know that you are an aware adult and you are watching them and you will not let anything bad happen to this child?
Yeah, absolutely.
People discount awareness, and I get it, because look, I'm very skeptical of nonprofits as well, and I encourage everyone to be very skeptical of nonprofits and to do your research and to vet the nonprofits before you support them. But that being said, it's an example of why awareness is so important. And in every situation, and this is a great example of that, awareness reduces the predator's ability to operate. It makes it harder for bad guys to do bad things to children. And that is a glaring example of just that. thank God you guys were there and that you said something.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
Just imagine. And this happens too often. Now, I want to unpack as well the lack of awareness in the general public and how important it is for people to understand what's happening right in front of them. And as helpful as movies like The Sound of Freedom are to help bring this to people's attention, there's also the more realistic way that it's really happening in the United States, in the communities near you. So that could look different depending where you live. But the point here is this is close to home and we need to take local action. All of us can do something to be part of the solution in our communities.
Well, I would say this. I think one of the issues is that people are too afraid to face the dark thoughts or feelings or emotions within themselves. So when you present them with something that's the dark end of society or the darker version of people, they can tend to shun away from that because they're so afraid to face those darker elements of themselves that they don't have the capability to face anything else. So it's almost like we have to kind of find a way to, which is so unfortunate, package this in a way that's kind of palatable for the average person, which is ridiculous in my opinion. But not everyone has the courage to do so. And that's where I think it's our duty as people that are willing to face ourselves to bring it forward.
Absolutely. As a child trafficking survivor, I do have a dark sense of humor, and it's an authentic smile, but I have to maintain that smile sometimes while unpacking this darkness in a way that is digestible and palatable for people.
Yeah.
Because my goal here is not to focus on the gruesome details, because why? And that helps no one, but also it's going to traumatize and y'all aren't ready. The point here is that this is the problem and this is the solution. Both these things matter. I have to make you aware of the problem, but I also have to simplify it.
Yeah.
And make it digestible so that you can chew on it and swallow it and digest it. Otherwise, people just spit it out because, oh, it's too much, it's too gross. And I get it, it's dark. But I personally, and those of us in this fight, like, we don't have a tolerance, with all the love and respect, with no judgment, we don't have the tolerance for grown adults being too afraid to think about things that children are experiencing on a daily basis. That's my level of tolerance, and I'm, in this fight on a daily basis. But I also want to highlight how actionable, I don't want to necessarily call it easy, but I want to say it's so attainable for everyone to do something to help.
Sure. Absolutely.
There's so much with the internet, with everything we have today. You can talk to your neighbors. I don't care if you're a hermit. You can share things on social media,
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of people don't get involved because, first of all, they can't, to your point, face themselves or face that darkness and be real with themselves. And I like how you said that. But there's also this aspect of, once people acknowledge that this is not a conspiracy theory, then they're faced with two choices. They can choose to ignore it, and that's going to be hard for most people to sleep at night, or they'll have to actually do something. And both of those things are uncomfortable.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we're here to let people know anyway. But to your point, we do want to make it not only relatable so people really understand what we're talking about, but break it down into bite-sized pieces for everyone. So
absolutely.
What do you think some of the main maybe misconceptions are, or some of the questions you might have heard or seen around child trafficking in the USA?
That it's not happening. That this is America. And it's like, me personally, I still regard this country as one of the greatest countries in the world. And a lot of Americans get rubbed the wrong, especially here in Los Angeles. A lot of Americans get rubbed the wrong way when I say that. They're like, oh, why is it great? There is so much opportunity here. There is so many great people that I've met and are so close to. I love this country. But just like every other country, it's not perfect. It has its problems, and this is one of them. And I think that's the misconception out there, is that a lot of people that do love this country still focus towards what's only good that's happening, not towards what we can how we can make it even better. And this is kind of one aspect of making it better, is showing people, well, this is what's happening right now. but it's almost like it's kind of been pushed to the bottom of the totem pole. It's like, well, people don't realize that there's that age-old saying, children are the future. So that's where we kind of need to protect and need to bring this up to the main focus, or one of the main focuses, sorry, is saving and rescuing the future, which is children.
Right. Not to mention the generational trauma we could prevent if we
absolutely
break that cycle, right?
Yeah,
So, a lot of hurting people in the world today. And that's tragic.
Absolutely.
Our goal here is to heal, because healed people heal people.
Absolutely. And that's it's interesting when it comes to healing. Just like a lot of people, when they find religion, they can kind of scope over what that really means, the kind of sacredness that some religions can have. It's the same thing with healing and spirituality. A lot of people, when they start going to therapy, or when they start kind of finding community, that's like, oh, I'm fully healed now. I'm the savior of this world. It's like, no, this is a lifetime process. It's not you take a pill or you go to one therapy session and it's all healed. No, it's a whole process that can take years of getting to know yourself on an extremely deep level, on how you work, how your mechanics work, how your family works, how your relationships with other people work. It's a whole thing, multifaceted thing that just doesn't, begin like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I say this all the time. There's no finish line to healing. It's
not absolutely
a finish and then you're done.
It's
not a linear process either. It's not ever like that. It's all over if you're actually doing the work.
No, 100%.
Let's segue into your work with mental health, because it's a great topic where I talk a lot about healing and overcoming trauma. And okay, let's generalize by saying, trauma is trauma. It kind of doesn't matter. You are traumatized by something that happened, and that's what we need to fix. But when we're talking about something as extreme as not only childhood, a word I can't say here, that type of trauma, but child trafficking, right? So that's a world most people don't understand. And that's a very extreme. I don't generally compare people's trauma, but I'm saying that's a very extreme trauma that most therapists aren't quite qualified to assist with.
Absolutely.
So we're quantifying it for the sake of it's not a forgive and forget situation. It's a whole other process. So there's a lot of stigma around, obviously child trafficking, which we've briefly unpacked, but
of course,
around survivors of horrific events. And let me explain a little bit from my experience. And I would love to know some of the healing strategies you've incorporated. And also let's talk about, mental health and healing as a whole. But first, with this premise related to child sex trafficking, it's a very dark world. A lot of people don't want to talk about, and a lot of survivors have a hard time surviving. Not only, and I'm less than 1% of victims are rescued. Most people cannot imagine what it's like overcoming that type of darkness. But to put it even more plainly, there's no support for survivors. Where's the therapy or the medical care or the housing or the education or a lot of other basic human needs? So this awareness is to bring attention to the fact that a lot of people, it's an understatement to say they are struggling, right? Because yes, but also it needs specific type of support. And then to make things even more complicated, it's unique to the individual. So there's also not a one-size-fits-all healing strategy for survivors of sex trafficking, because every person's situation is so different and so unique to them, and their healing journey is also so unique to them. So my summary or conclusion or oversimplification of this very complex aspect of healing from extreme trauma is that healing is a choice. You're the only one who can decide to heal, and the extent to which you allow yourself to heal.
Absolutely.
There's not a finish line. It is not a linear process, and it is not easy, but it's a choice. And you choose to no longer be controlled by what used to control you. Absolutely.
It really does take extreme amounts of courage to face yourself. It is really hard. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's an extremely difficult process to heal from any kind of trauma. I mean, it's a multifaceted thing. Like you said, it depends on the individual, and it's a choice to heal. But it's extremely difficult on an individual level to face yourself and what you're going through, what you're experiencing. I think that's one thing where this growing up, schooling systems kind of fail us, is how to deal with our own thoughts. You know, especially if you go through something that causes you to have dark thoughts or dark emotions, or, you know, that's one thing that isn't processed, or we're not learnt to process in a healthy way, I don't think. Or it's just not taught how to kind of speak about it, especially with a lot of men in particular. A lot of men don't voice their the shame that they carry around, the guilt that they carry around, or their own traumas. You know, I've been part of multiple men's groups in the past, and it's almost like invigorating to a lot of men that they're finally able to share the struggles that they're going through, or the struggles that they've been through. And that's part of, you know, bringing things to the surface, bringing things to light. You're able to kind of talk about it and dissect it, and you're able to process it, because that's what needs to happen. Is we need to process what's going on, what we're going through. How can we better ourselves? How can we better our society? It all begins on bettering ourselves. That's how we create a healthier, better, more stable society. It begins with yourself. So in terms of the healing, that like it really is begins with you.
100%. I love everything you said. And I want to highlight the aspect of it begins with you, because I know, let me back out and say, working in this industry is not for everyone. It's
Sure.
how I fight back, and it's a huge part of my healing. But it's also allowed me to encounter some of the most incredible people in the world who have quite honestly restored my faith in humanity.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I purposely surround myself with good quality people.
Mm.
And at the same time, I also have the unique pleasure of interfacing with a lot of people who are voicing their questions in the nicest way possible. I interface with a lot of people who call this a theory, who call me all kinds of hilarious things. I have a real dark sense of humor, so like I am not easily offended at all. But, and again, you know, a lot of these people are like watching 2 minutes of a discussion on the internet and come in with a lot of things to say that they haven't researched. So
of course,
I like to raise their awareness, but the point is that it's important. There's a lot of people who are compelled to help this mission. And I see two specific categories of this. People who are unhealed and are angry. Oh, this is a theory. No, what you're saying is wrong. No, that's not true. That they just come in aggressive. And I can feel the hurt behind them. I also can sense people's energies, but like I can feel it's coming from this place of pain and anger, and they probably haven't dealt with their childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And then separately, I see people who come in with, you know, tears and wanting to help and all this kind of stuff, but they are in a place where they have not faced their need to heal. And they themselves are so broken that it's almost like they would not be able to pour from an empty cup. They would not really be, everyone can help, right? Let me clarify that. But I caution these people, or you can share a post, you can comment on social media, but to really get involved with something as dark and difficult as this, it's so important to be grounded. And
absolutely.
Yeah, there's no finish line to healing. It's not like any of us are the shining examples. It's just that if you're not grounded, you can't help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'd also say this. I think one of the important aspects is triggering people's curiosity. Is because when people get curious about a certain subject, they'll ask questions. They'll want to find out more. And and it does come to a certain degree that if people aren't ready to face themselves, they won't want to take on any darkness. Everybody is at their own kind of stage in life. You can't kind of force things down people's throats. And you wouldn't really want to do that either, because that's where the kind of tension and friction can come up. and that's why so many people can tend to steer away from stories like these. But yeah, I would say that's one aspect for sure.
Yeah, my goal is always to bridge the gap in communication. So, like I have a very honest face, and sometimes I, can't control that. But it's never coming from a place, and I never want to express myself in a place of, from any kind of judgment or like, what are you talking about? It's not about that for me. Because look, first of all, I know what I'm talking about. It's not a joke to me. This is not, yes, I know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm very passionate about this cause. So it's not that you're going to make me question, whether or not this is real. So I don't take any offense to their lack of understanding.
Yeah.
My goal is always to bridge the gap in communication. And again, applying that with the mental health discussion, a lot of people are so isolated and estranged. So again, there's this whole world of survivors that don't want anyone to know what happened to them, don't want anyone to know, because there's all this stigma and people think you're dangerous and all these ridiculous things. So in bridging that gap, we're trying to bring people together. So, I'm human, but my goal is always to address these people with so much, with grace and with respect. But it's also knowing that if they're coming from a place of frustration and anger, they're most likely hurting inside, and something triggered that. Right now, it's not. Yeah. I did not trigger them. Something they heard or thought they heard. There's something inside of them that is essentially bubbling up right now. So that's me coming at it from a place of compassion, knowing that they're hurting. And I'm not, first of all, allowing them to attack me, like, no, but also it's not about that. It's about unity, because the more distracted, disunited, and divided we are, the weaker we are as a whole and as a force against this evil. It is about standing together united and strong in numbers.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to help in any way that I could. And so I, like you, surround myself, or try to surround myself, with good people, strong people, emotionally kind of stable people, in the sense of like they've done a lot of work on themselves, and they're grounded. And a lot of people that are into endurance, not all, but a lot of people that are into endurance are extremely grounded people. The reason being is because when you're running for 7 hours, 8 hours, you have a lot of time to face every single thought that comes up, every single thought, every single memory, every single emotion that comes up into your body. You have hours upon hours upon hours to face it. So a lot of people in the endurance community are extremely grounded because they have no choice but to face themselves. It's almost, you don't have the choice.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I love running longer distances so much, is because I get to process almost the subconscious thoughts that I haven't been able to process through my weekly going to work or whatever. When I'm out on the trail on a Sunday for 7 hours or 4 hours or however long it is, everything bubbles up. I mean, I'll be on trail. Sometimes I'll talk to myself. I'll talk to God. I'll talk to whatever kind of comes up that needs to process. I mean, that's one of the blessings of it. And so if I can help in bringing more of those strong, grounded people into the awareness of Vets for Child Rescue, have you heard of this foundation that's doing incredible things on rescuing children in America? Oh, I've never heard of it. Well, here, let me give you some information. Maybe you guys can help out too. Like, maybe you can help spread awareness of what they're doing, and so on and so forth, and kind of creates a network in an endurance community. And so on and so forth.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you so much for doing that. I know you got to leave soon, so I want to be respectful of your time, but if you were to apply this message to people in general, so not specifically to survivors of trafficking, but to anyone who's dealing with any mental health obstacles, whatever it may be, what are some of your strategies or suggestions for processing that and getting comfortable with yourself, like you've explained?
So here's the thing. The way that I dealt with my mental health in the beginning, I was thrown into it, not by choice. So I used to have epilepsy, so I would have seizures, and I had to take this medication for, when I was 12, I had to start taking this medication to kind of keep my seizures under control. And then as I grew up and got more health conscious and more health aware of what certain medications can do to you long term, I wanted to get off this stuff. And it had been a few years since I'd had a seizure, so I felt comfortable with approaching my neurologist back home in Australia, saying, I want to get off this medication. What do I have to do to get off it? And, you know, he was very open about, okay, well, we need to take some brain scans and have an EEG and so on and so forth to see if there's still any kind of triggers in your brain that are possibly causing epilepsy. And I said, okay, great. So I had the brain scans and they came back completely normal. So I was like, okay, so what's the process? Like, okay, well, now we can start getting you off in 2-3 months. I was like, amazing, great. But it was actually, what I found out was the wrong advice, because I had been on it for so long. I'd been on it for, I think, close to 15 years, actually. My body was not used to not having this medication anymore. So my whole body went essentially into this, what's the word when you, I went into shock, essentially. Like, my body went into this like state of alarm bells ringing. Oh, you're not taking this medication anymore. And I ended up going into this kind of catatonic state where I couldn't process anything anymore. And my wife at the time knew a pharmacist. And so we called them up not knowing what to do. And the pharmacist said, who told you to get off in 3 months? Like, this should have been a 2-year process because you've been on it for so long. So their advice was either start taking the medication again or just kind of bear through what's to come. And me being egotistical at sometimes, I'm like, okay, no, I'm going to go through it and I'm not going to take this medication anymore. And it was the best decision I made, to be honest. It really was. But through that, I developed harm OCD at the time, which, those of you who don't know what harm OCD is, it's essentially, you would see something like a lighter or a kitchen knife, a simple kitchen knife, and your brain will trigger a thought saying, oh, that's a kitchen knife, it's a sharp object. You could essentially start cutting yourself or cutting others or cutting your neighbors and hurting everyone around you. And so I essentially traumatized myself with my own mind. So what I had to do is I had to go to therapy. Therapy was the first thing. I had to go through these extensive books on PTSD that my therapist helped me with, certain exercises, which, if you're having any form of trauma like that, I would suggest, that would be my first suggestion, is go and seek professional guidance. That was my biggest thing. Because I wouldn't be here today if I didn't seek professional help. So therapist and psychologist. Once I started kind of getting on top of that, then I started doing things like, I would look in the mirror. I would kind of force myself to look at myself and be extremely honest with who I am, what I'm going through. At the time, that all came out. I split up with my ex-wife, so I was essentially going through all of this stuff alone. And because of that, I ended up becoming homeless. And that was an extremely difficult time as well. I was homeless only for a short time. I had extremely close friend back home in Australia. Oh, sorry. He was originally from Australia, but he's in America now. But he ended up housing me, so I'm very grateful to him. But I essentially would look in the mirror and be honest with myself. Okay, I'm going through this thing. This is what I'm going through, and it's okay. It's okay to be experiencing every single thing that I'm feeling, every single thing that I'm thinking, even though they're horrible things that I was thinking at the time and experiencing and not know. I essentially had to rewire my brain and rewire how I would process thoughts. So it's almost accepting what you're going through. It's the acceptance of it, not fighting it. Oh, I can't go through this. I don't want to go through this. I have an image to uphold. I have friends I need to impress. I have people I need to impress. Oh, I'm feeling all this shame with family and all this other stuff. And it's like, that needs to just go out the window. It's like, this is real. This is what I'm experiencing. I'm experiencing pain right now. I'm experiencing shame, guilt, anger, fear, frustration. And kind of when you acknowledge that what you're going through, that's where you can find gratitude. It's like, wow, I'm having a human experience right now. This is extremely difficult, but I'm alive, and it's one day at a time. And it's kind of one foot in front of the other. So my advice would be, one is to seek professional help. Two would just be accepting that this is happening, and that's okay. It's okay that it's happening. It's okay. What I'm going through is okay. Like, this is just part of the human experience, to experience every single emotion, because reality is, what we've been told is that we always need to be happy. It's like, that's not true. That's not part of being human. We're not always going to be happy. We're not always going to be in a safe place. That's not realistic. And so I think that's been a misconception, is we always have to be this kind of perfect image and perfect happiness and perfect life. And it's like, I don't think that would be a good thing, because then you're not going to really grow. You're not going to experience every single multifaceted experience life has to offer. So yeah, I think those would be the main things. Acceptance is a big one, and then just being kind and gentle to yourself, and also trying to surround yourself with people that are also very loving, and people that are patient, because I kind of try to pride myself on surrounding myself with people who I think are further along in the healing process than I am, or further along and more successful in life than I am. So I can better myself and say, oh, this is where I need to work on myself. I'm good right now, but how can I get even greater? How can I become more healthier, so then I can open up and help others? Because the healthier that I am, the more I can help other people. The more, like we said before, the more grounded I am, the more grounded I can be, and more patient I can be with other people. More loving I can be with other people. More Absolutely. Loving. The more loving I am with myself, the more loving I can be with other people. Because the reality is, if you're talking horribly to yourself, you're not going to have the capability to for a while, like maybe for a short period, but not forever. You're not going to have the patience. You blow up eventually, to help others in that sense. So it definitely starts with the self.
Absolutely. I wish, peace and healing and happiness on everyone, specifically people who have overcome and endured extreme trauma or any type of severe trauma. You've suffered enough. There's no reason to continue suffering. Now, we're not trying to pretend like this is easy. We're being real about the struggle and about how there's no finish line. But we're also saying that if right now you're in the place where you're not valuing yourself enough to prioritize your own healing, let me offer you this. Until you heal, until you start with yourself, you will be less able to help other people. In this fight to protect children, everyone is needed. There's not enough of us. The children need us. This is real, and it's urgent.
Absolutely.
But focusing on your own healing, it's not just for you, but the benefits are so endless, and you help so many more people having that ability to shine and to be comfortable with yourself and be confident in your light.
Absolutely.
Josh, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed this discussion. Absolutely. I think we could talk for hours. I know you have a run to make tonight, but we posted your website here on the screen. If anyone wants to reach out or has questions, he has his contact information on his website. Please follow him on social media. Josh, we look forward to seeing a lot more updates from you and running in your V4CR shirts. We appreciate you raising awareness and spreading the word, man. Thank you.
Yeah, amen for that. Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you again. We look forward to seeing more of you. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks.
Bye-bye.